Welcome, everyone. I'm here today to share a bit about the Nuclear Waste Management Organization and the work we do. We were formed in 2002 under the Nuclear Fuel Waste Act, which is a federal legislation. We are responsible for the safe long-term management of Canada's fuel waste, including fuel waste from emerging technologies such as small modular reactors. We are not for profit organization and we are funded by the waste producers in Canada. Our mission is to implement Canada's plan, which is called Adaptive Phase Management. And that plan was developed through 3 years of extensive dialogue and collaborations with various municipal, Indigenous communities, industry, regulators, all level of government for the safe long-term management of Canada's used nuclear fuel in a manner that protects people and the environment for generations to come. So, what is used nuclear fuel? Just to make this a little bit interactive, and I know we don't have that much time, maybe if you could just write in the chat, what do you think? Is it liquid, solid, or gas? Just a quick quiz. So I see something's come in already, Marcus. Thank you. So I use nuclear fuel is a byproduct of producing nuclear power, which has a lot of benefit, be it emission-free electricity for our economy, or I know, like for instance, a lot of it is being used in Ontario right now, but we also have New Brunswick that's using it, and I'm glad to see that there are other provinces considering it. And also a lot of the world and Canada's medical isotopes for diagnosing cancer, treatment, or for sterilization of medical equipments are generated in nuclear power plants. And I see that everyone actually has answered the question correctly. It is solid. So that's actually a very informed group already. I'm glad to see this. As you can see here, it is uranium. I mean, a lot of depictions outside, especially in social media and movies, sometimes you see that they're showing it as these green liquid. It's far from it. It's a stable ceramic pellet. I actually have, I'm not sure if any of you have seen them. This is, of course, simulated. It's not the real one, but it looks like this. It's a stable ceramic pellet of uranium dioxide, which actually starts its journey in Saskatchewan, and then it ends up in Ontario being processed into these pellets. And then about 25 of these pellets form into a pencil, we call them, and then there are a number of those pencils depending on the design, 27 or 37. The one we are showing here is, of course, for the CANDU reactors that is currently, in operations in Canada. And it is that it becomes a fuel bundle, and that fuel bundle is made of zirconium alloy, which is a corrosion-resistant material. It is a size of a fireplace log, and one of those can basically heat 100 homes for a year, or you could imagine that it can house of 4 people in it, a family of 4, basically, they can have their home energized or powered by this one of these bundles for 100 years. It is when it goes inside the reactor, it's basically where the reaction happens, the fission occurs, it heats the water and produces the steam that turns the turbine and produces electricity. But when it comes out, it's basically exact same shape, and it looks exactly the same as when it went in. The only difference is it is now highly radioactive, and it will remain highly radioactive for a long time. So what happens, and so that's very important that we manage that radioactivity. So what happens next is that when it comes out, it is placed in the water-filled pools. It is normally called irradiated fuel bay, for instance. And as you can see from the pool in that picture, there's about 3 to 5 meters of water in that pool. And water is a really good shield for the radioactivity, but it also helps to dissipate the heat. And as you can tell, as you can see from the picture, that individual, the operator who's in there, he is not even wearing any special protection equipment, because that's not needed. It doesn't have the radioactivity that would get out of that water or the pool. After about 10 years that it has been in that pool, it is transferred and placed in the dry storage containers. These containers are very robust, and each container is about 20 inches thick, which is the size of, for instance, my arm. Again, it's just so that it's a containment of the radioactivity. Again, the white containers, you see that is at Ontario Power Generation, and there are some different designs that are being used, but they're all pretty much similar in what they do, basically contain the radioactivity to a point that people are just wearing their everyday civil clothing. The dry storage is proven technology that has been around the world since 1980s. It's regulated through CNSC, Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, and internationally monitored through our IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, and has been considered to be temporary for storage. Basically, it is safe, but of course, but it is temporary, and it's not recognized as appropriate for a long term, because some of the radionuclides in those fuels, they are going to be with us for hundreds of thousands of years. So another question, and let's see if you guys can get this one right. How many used fuel do you think we have in Canada as we speak now? I'm just going to kind of talk about the map a bit and give you a little bit of time to think about how many do you think there are. So as I noted, there are about there are used like the interim storage facilities, as we call them, all over Ontario, because that's where most of the nuclear power plants are, but also in Quebec, the Hydro-Quebec, as well as New Brunswick for Point-Lepreau. And those are basically, they're all holding all the nuclear fuel that has been used in the past 50 years in Canada. So I don't see as many answer this time. Let me just see if there are any that maybe I am oh, okay, so no, I don't see as many answers. I see one, but what I meant was basically nuclear fuel bundles. And right now, as we speak, or at least up to this date, there are about 3.1 million used nuclear fuel bundles. And if you stack them like the cordwood, all this used nuclear fuel could fit into 9 hockey rinks from the ice surface to the top of the board. And when you think about how many years these power plants have been in operations and have been providing electricity for New Brunswick, Quebec, and Ontario, that's about like 50 years roughly. And we know exactly where all that nuclear fuel waste is, and it is filling in about 9 hockey rinks. So that's kind of like a square footage or that you could think of or visualize in your head. So this is a picture of what a deep geological repository could look like, because as I mentioned, the interim storage is just temporary, but Canada's plan is calling for used nuclear fuel to be disposed of in a deep geological repository, which is built to a depth of more than 500 meters. And if you have ever been in Toronto, that is almost as tall as a CN Tower, that we would be going down deep into the earth. It is a network of underground tunnels and placement groups. It will be located in a safe, suitable location, which I will discuss a little bit in the next slide. It is, so this is like a little bit of the design, which is a series of engineered and natural barriers that work together to safely contain and isolate the used nuclear fuel. There are 5 barriers or layers. One is the pellet that I mentioned. The small pellet itself is very durable, stable. It doesn't melt easily. It doesn't get corroded easily, and it doesn't get dissolved in water easily. So then after that, and most of the radioactivity is in this little pellet afterwards when it comes out. But within a bundle, which there are a number of these pellets, again, that itself being zirconium alloy is resistance to the corrosion to the water, water corrosion. And then it's the fuel container itself, which is copper coated. And we have a lot of history that the copper stays for millions of years underwater without being changed to any other form. And then after that is the bentonite clay and the geosphere, which is a natural rock, which could either be crystalline or sedimentary rock, depending on where we actually select the site. And these design ensures basically that they're all like a barrier and a backstop to the last one. So if one fails, another one will ensure any dangerous material remains contained. So where are we thinking of putting this? As you can see from this map, there are two sites right now, the blue ones, but originally, I'll give you a little bit of a brief history. There were 20 municipalities. This was a voluntary activity. So there were 20 municipalities, including a couple of First Nation communities and Métis communities that raised their hand and basically said that they like to host this repository. But it has, over the years, we have screened out for various reasons, most importantly because of the suitability of the geology in the area. And so we have now brought it down to two. The one number 5 is basically in the northwestern Ontario, and that is more like a granite rock type, and then the one in the southern Ontario, it's a crystalline rock, and both of them are suitable for this purpose. It's just we are making sure that it's also a willing and informed host before we select that site. A number of safety analysis has gone into it to do our analysis. We do actually have 2 reports on our website, in addition to many other reports that you could find. But the 2 reports is for each site. We have a confidence and safety report, which basically says both sites are suitable geology. And once we select the site, we are going to have further analysis done to make sure that the entire life cycle of the project is considered, from construction, operation, transportation, and long-term safety and monitoring. And it will also consider various scenarios, not just the normal operation, but also what-if scenarios and worst-case scenarios. So transportation, as mentioned just in the last slide, it is going to be a big part of our plan. There are a number of fuel bundles, as I mentioned earlier, about 3.1 millions of fuel bundles right now. But by the end of life of all the power plants, we will have about maybe 5.5. And then on top of that, having the SMRs and other technologies coming in, there will be a lot, potentially more fuel bundles. And that would require about 40 to 50 years of transportation of these fuel bundles to the sites. So we have done a number of studies on this as part of the early research and demonstrations. We have built and certified the used fuel transportation container, and we are continuing to learn international experience. There has been more than 50 years of safe used nuclear fuel shipments worldwide. And in Canada, the transportation of the used nuclear fuel is jointly regulated by Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission and Transport Canada. And there are stringent regulations that we have to meet before we actually start the transportation. This is just a quick overview of the APM timeline, and APM stands for Adaptive Phase Management, which was Canada's plan for the long-term and safe storage or safe disposal of the fuel. So as I noted, we are going to be selecting the site in 2024. And then after that, the regulatory and decision-making and licensing process begins. We will have a center of expertise, which we are going to be building near or at the repository site, which will reflect the local characteristics of the area. We do have a couple of actually designs on our websites, and people are giving us more feedback on them. But we are anticipating breaking ground on the repository sometime in 2030s and then beginning operations in 2040s. And as I mentioned, it will be taking up to 50 years to complete, all the transportation of and putting in and placing all the fuel bundles, depending on the inventory of the used fuel that is being managed. And then after the repository is filled up, we will be monitoring for an extended period of time before decommissioning and closing and doing a post-closure monitoring. So as you can see, the timeline is pretty long, so it's very important that we actually continue our implementation of the Canada's plan. So just a quick few words on the Working Towards Reconciliation. At 2018, NWMO released a reconciliation statement acknowledging historical wrongs in Canada's past and recognizing NWMO's ongoing involvement, collaboration, and discussions with Indigenous people. In 2019, we formalized our reconciliation policy, and which basically includes activity for respectful and meaningful engagement with Indigenous people and communities, and making sure that we are providing cultural awareness and reconciliation training for our staff and contractors. And we are committing to interviewing Indigenous knowledge into all our work. And then in addition to that, in addition to working with Indigenous communities, we continue to have community involvement with all the interested parties. NWMO is committed to meaningful partnership with the communities in the areas where the project could eventually be located. This is a national infrastructure project that will be about $26 billion. And as you can imagine, it will stand to create and sustain thousands of high-value jobs, as well as we provide a number of educational opportunities and engagement activities for the communities. So for instance, just last year alone, we did about more than 240 engagement activities, which we estimate more than 3,000 people participated. I'm getting my cue that we need to go to the question and answers, but let me just finish. I believe I'm done. Yes. So I just want to basically in closing say that no matter what the source of the fuel, meaning if it's from our CANDU reactors as of now, or from our SMR, safety will be the top priority for our people, of course, safety and the environment, and for the generations to come. And our adaptive phase management, just as the name indicates, we are going to be incorporating new knowledge and adapting to new technology as they come up. And based on international consensus, the Deep Geological Repository represents the best practice for the long-term management of used fuel.